YouTube. Not got a video this week, got something a little bit better. Just doing a live stream now. Hopefully everything's working fine. But I just wanted to let you know of something that we're launching in 2017, and it's called the Fitness Hour. And if you're an MMA fan, you may know of the MMA Hour, which is done by Ariel and all the other guys over there. So the Fitness Hour will be an hour long, maybe longer, where we'll be getting different fitness experts on the show. It'll be nice and relaxed, and we'll be talking about multiple different topics to do with fitness, so training, nutrition, the business side of things as well, and some little off-topic things as well, because I do like MMA, and we'll probably chat a little bit about that, being a little bit more focused on that than maybe other sports, but we will be covering everything. So what you're going to see now is a recording which even our Shredded by Science Academy members haven't even seen yet, unless you're watching this now on the live stream. And it is our Shredded by Science study school. So each week our head researcher Chad Doland goes through studies or a topic, and he breaks it down and makes it simple, nice and simple, so people can understand some complex topics. So SBS Study School for today, or the live stream, is looking at the older adult, because they tend to get neglected, and some periodisation strategies you could use to improve their health. So I'm going to shut up and you will now see that video. If you've got any questions, please post them in the comment section and I'll get to them as soon as possible. But really looking forward to the Fitness Hour. Just wanted to say a massive thank you for supporting the channel and helping it grow. It's grown quite quick in a short space of time, and looking forward to 2017 and the Fitness Hour.
Skeletal muscle mass per year, which can be exacerbated by periods of injury or hospital stays or like bed rest, which again becomes more common in later stages of life. And then on top of that, we also lose 2.5 to 5% of our strength per year, whether this is dynamic strength or isometric strength. It's just melting away. So this happens for a multitude of reasons, and it could be simply behavioral, where as we get older, we become more sedentary, as we just, in general, due to sarcopenia and due to other things, our physical function, our capacity, our ability to be, young and athletic and rambunctious, I guess you could say, kind of just goes away. So we behaviorally start to do less and less leisure time, moderate to vigorous physical activity. So we're losing muscle mass, we're losing cardiovascular training from a behavioral standpoint, but also there's a shift in the immune system. The immune cells become a little bit more pro-inflammatory in nature, and we start having more inflammatory proteins within the blood. Now these can disrupt signaling in the skeletal muscle and start to make glucose use for fuel a little bit more difficult, and then just muscle recovery in general takes a little bit longer. So if you just kind of put those two things together, they can work independently to influence sarcopenia, but they also can feed into each other. Where if we're doing less activity in general, we're going to accumulate more body fat. Body fat is what's going to secrete these inflammatory proteins and markers. Those are then going to go back and start to affect the muscle and make it not as good at using glucose for fuel, raising insulin resistance, feeding back into more fat tissue, which is then going to make recovery harder, and it's just this perfect storm, and everything just seems to want to get worse as we get older. But the light at the end of the tunnel here is that the behavioral part is reversible, and if you reverse that sedentary behavior with resistance training, which we'll talk about today, you can then start to improve the inflammatory changes within the blood, decrease those a little bit, and for most cases, reverse sarcopenia. So why is this important? It goes far beyond wanting to bench or squat as a master's powerlifter, because activities of daily living are linked to our strength, and activities of daily living, or our ability to do them well, is linked to our mortality as early as our 40s and our 50s. Now, this is from a study of approximately 2,000, I think it was 2,200 and change, older adults, 70 to 79 years old, split into men and women. Now, what they did was they measured the older adults' hand grip strength and their knee extension strength, and they related that to their survivability or their mortality over a 5-year enrollment period. So if we look at our first set of graphs up here on the top left, we'll see on the left side, the y-axis is survival rate. This is in percent, so 1 is 100, 0.65. The bottom here is 65%. Same thing on the other side, and then we have our months on the x-axis, our 5 years, right? So everyone starts up here at 1 or 100% survivability in all 5 groups, and then we see that there's a negative slope, the lowest down here having approximately 67% survivability, or 33% mortality, and then the top being 91-ish percent survivability or 9% mortality. And now what this figure specifically is and what it is showing us is that the individuals with the lower knee extension strength down here, less than 90, did not survive as long, right? Less of them were alive after 5 years in this particular study. Individuals with the strongest knee extensors had the highest survivability. This exact pattern was repeated in the hand grip strength, which is our companion figure here, and then it was repeated again in the opposite sex, which is females, knee extension down here, hand grip over here. So it seems that, sarcopenia is directly, in some ways it's related to our very survivability and mortality, but strength, that 2.5% to 5% loss in strength, is much more influential than the 1% to 2% loss in muscle mass. And the problem is that approximately 4.4% of US adults over 6 years participate in resistance training. So we're looking at 4, maybe 5 out of 100, okay? Now this study that we're looking at today didn't just look at resistance training, it looked at periodized models of resistance training and its effectiveness in older adults. Now, before we look at the text at the top, I just want to direct everyone's attention down to the figure below here. This arrow that's pointing to our right represents time. This study took 31 calendar or chronological weeks, okay? The first week was a familiarization period, so upon subjects saying, I want to do this, being recruited, they then came and saw the research team twice. They learned how to use the equipment, how to use all of the different exercises. And then after they were familiar with the equipment and how to actually do a couple reps, they did their strength testing, their leg press, and their chest press 1RMs. Then they lived their life as a normal person for 4 weeks, and they came back and they validated or verified their starting strength levels and repeated their strength, their their chest press and their leg press tests, as well as some other ones, which we'll talk about in the results section. Then they did a 22-week training program. This training program was 3 days per week, except for, again, chronological week 22, 25, and 28, where they only trained once per week. And then week 19, they didn't do any training because they actually had a strength test on week 19 in the middle of the study. But that data is reported in another paper, not this one, so we won't actually talk about it. Now they looked at non-periodized training, or a simple 3x10 model, for example, versus block periodized training, where they had blocks of specific set and rep schemes, and then daily undulating periodization, where they had every set and rep scheme present during the week. So let's take a closer look at those here. And table 1 at the top, we have our training programs. Non-periodized training was, again, 6 blocks of 3 to 4 weeks of 3 sets of 10 repetition max. Block periodization was 3 to 4 weeks of 3 sets of 15 repetition max, then 3 sets of 10 repetition max, then 3 sets of 5 repetition max, and then it repeated itself, that cycle. And then DUP was the first session of the week, 3x15 RM, second session, 3x10 RM, third session, 3x5 RM. So again, everything was present, all set and repetition schemes within the week for the entire study. Now these older adults were untrained, and we can look at their characteristics in table 2 down here below. They were about 70 years old. Their BMI was just over the cutoff for normal weight, which is 19 to 24. They were on average 25 in each group, 25 or 26, which is actually a very good place to be for an older adult, as having a little bit more tissue, just in general, makes you a little bit more resistant to the effects of sarcopenia and the negative effects of muscle mass loss on our mortality, which we kind of touched on just briefly previously. Now, in this study, there were 3 dropouts related to injury, 1 dropout in each group. 2 of them were related to the chest press 1RM. They had reported muscle strains or discomfort, so they were dismissed from the protocol to not exacerbate those issues. And then 1 felt like they could not do all of the training because rep max protocols are very difficult. And then they voluntarily withdrew in an effort not to quit later on or get injured, I guess you could say. So only 3 dropouts, but it was a pretty intensive training program for untrained older adults. Let's take a look at our results. Now, I do want to quickly touch on the adherence rates, which were well above 85%, which was the cutoff in the paper. They were above 95% in all cases for these individuals over the course of 22 weeks, which is a very long training study in a population that's rather hard to work with. From personal experience, in college-age individuals that just want to lift weights and be big and strong, adherence of 90% is pretty typical. So these older adults really did a great job coming in for the researchers and being committed to the study. Our first figure here under our adherence statistics is going to be a companion A and B figure showing the volume across the groups and within the entire study. If we look at our top, our figure A, or panel A of this first figure, we have group mean volume load in kilograms. We can see the dark bars, which are the non-periodized group, are the shortest bars in almost all of the clusters, and they don't really grow or shrink very much. And this is again because it's non-periodized, 3 sets of 10. There was a period of not training, a week of not training, which you can see this linear increase, the 3x10 linear increase seems to reset itself, and then weeks 3 and 6 are approximately at the same height, so they were basically just as strong after working back up from that week of not training. We see in the middle there the block periodization bars with the slants. They start the highest with the 3x15, then they get matched with the other groups at 3x10, then they're the lowest with 3x5, and that repeats, which we expect. Lastly, our DUP bar, similar to the non-periodization bar, doesn't really grow too much in size. It kind of stays pretty consistent, and it's almost matching the other bars or in the middle of the other bars, and that's because they have the 15 reps present, the 10 reps present, and the 5 rep present during every single week of the entire study. What's most important is this group of bars at the very end, which is the average volume load over the entire 22-week training program, and as we can see, all the bars are basically the same height, and their error bars all overlap each other, so the volume was equated in this study. The same patterns we see below with the repetitions completed. 3x10 doesn't change, they stay the exact same size. 3x15 decreases from 15, 10 to 5, and then the DUP group stays the same as well because 15, 10, or 5 repetitions were present every single week. And then, of course, the repetitions in the entire study were equated. Now, let's look at the effects of this training program, which was machine-based and progressive. There was a progressive overload applied when necessary or when appropriate. So it was a machine-based progressive program, and in 22 weeks, it decreased systolic blood pressure in this population. Non-periodized group dropped 13 points. Block periodized dropped 3 points. DUP dropped 0 points, or it did not change. Body fat percentage decreased. Lean mass percentage increased, and fat mass percentage, of course, decreased, which we would expect from the body fat percentage results. The HDL cholesterol raised a little bit in all of the groups, which was significant. Now, there were no differences found between these programs, but there was a significant sex effect found for the reduction of body fat mass in kilograms. There were greater reductions in men, 3.4 kilograms with a small effect versus 1.86 kilograms with a small effect. This is expected based on our hormonal differences, and also men and women utilize substrates a little bit differently. And I didn't touch on this, but this study did a very good job of balancing out the men and women, the amount of men and women in each group across the entire study. And you really need to be careful to control that because of things like this. Sex differences are important to start to elucidate. There's a big push from the NIH to begin, comparing men to women within your studies, and you need to appropriately power each of the sexes to be able to do those comparisons. So the study was well done in that regard. Now, all of the groups increased their peak isometric torque, increased their chest press 1RM, increased their leg press 1RM, became better at stair climbing. One of the things that is important is walking speed for older adults. It's related to mortality. It's a very common test. And then chair standing as well. So we don't have walking speed, but we do have stair climbing, which, faster walking speeds would equate to more dynamic power, I guess you could say. All of these individuals got faster at climbing up a flight of standard stairs, almost half-second reductions across the board, which indicates that they did start generating a lot more muscular power because they weren't just traveling across flat ground, but they were traveling across and up a flight of stairs. So that's an excellent result. Chair stands, again, this is an excellent result. The speed in which they could do 5 repetitions decreased by 2 to almost 3 seconds across the board. So another very good result. If we're thinking back to the relation between activities of daily living and mortality, this is very positive results for only a 22-week training study. Balance confidence did improve based off of a survey. Balance is very important because it directly affects balance confidence. In most cases is going to affect an older adult's willingness to participate in moderate to vigorous physical activity, which is going to affect their ability to do ADLs like the stair climbing, the chair standing, getting groceries, doing laundry, things like that, just in general. So seeing balance increase is kind of an indicator that quality of life also likely increased as well. They looked at the macronutrient distribution of this population as well based off of 3-day dietary food records. They did give everyone protein supplements after training to standardized diet. So as we would expect, or as expected from that, protein increased from 19.5% of their total calories to 21.2% of their total calories. And then fat decreased as well, which they did not do anything but give these individuals protein and watch how they ate. So habitually, the entire study group decreased their fat intake from 33.8% of total calories to 31.4% of total calories by the end of the study. There were no differences in strength results, physical capacity from stair climbing and chair stands, balance confidence, or dietary results among the groups. So I think it's very important to note that this study was equally effective no matter what protocol was used, non-periodized, block periodized, or DUP. And this isn't super surprising because in most cases, beginners will benefit from doing anything. Now, especially if we think about the older adult, based on our previous discussion, they're going to benefit from any sort of resistance training. This study was very, very good because it used 3 protocols that were designed much better than the vast majority of studies in this older adults group. Typically, studies will say they did 3 to 5 sets of 10 to 15 repetition maximum. So you have at most 75 maximum effort repetitions, or 30 compared to 30. So you can have up to 150% variation within a study. And this one was volume matched with very specific rep targets and sets laid out for us. So it was a very well-designed study from a programming standpoint in that regard, and it would make it easy to compare this study to other studies and also within itself if we're, again, looking at the vast majority of the literature, which is like our secondary example. That's very hard to find a minimum effective dose or an effective dose at all whenever you have the potential for up to 150% work variance within your study, much less across studies doing the exact same thing. So I think the study is leaps and bounds ahead of several others in this field, just based off the programming alone. Now, if we think about the strength results, they found or observed a 15% increase in peak isometric torque from this 22-week program and 38.7% increase in the dynamic strength represented by the chest press and the leg press. Now, this is really, really cool because if you think of that in terms of sarcopenia, losing 2.5% per year, you've seen like a 5 to 15 year reversal in that decline in performance in a mere 22 weeks. So it goes to show or highlights what I said earlier, that older adults can start that behavior change at any age and see tremendous benefit in a short amount of time. Now, with that in mind, the study still may have been too short to see a real difference between the training programs. Since they were untrained, neural adaptations probably were what was primarily driving most of these strength increases and the torque increases and such. So longer training periods may require more variation or a better training organization than the non-periodized program, because the general adaptation syndrome is only going to happen so many different times. The non-periodization program, doing only 3 sets of 10, is more limited in its ability to change its stimulus to keep the general adaptation syndrome rolling through cycles over and over and over to keep progressing. Now, the effect size favored block periodization, and you could see the raw values on the previous slide. were a little bit higher for the block periodization in terms of strength, but they had more specific training. They did the 5RM block immediately before their medium test, the midpoint testing and the endpoint testing. Neuromuscular adaptations are going to be specific. If you're doing 5RM, it's more close to the leg press and the chest press test than doing 3x10 or 15, 10, and 5RM in 1 week. They had more concentrated practice there at the end. But again, it's important to note that the volume was equated and the gains were also equated across the board. There was that large, almost 15-point blood pressure decrease in the non-periodized subjects, but it's important to note that they were stage 1 hypertensive before starting this program. So they actually had a big decrease because they had the highest initial value that was also pathological. And then they fell down and they were equal with everyone at the very end of the study, and everyone was still pre-hypertensive, but going from stage 1 hypertension to pre-hypertensive in older adults with resistance training is it's a very good finding. It's kind of counterintuitive. Most people are worried about resistance training in older adults because of blood pressure, but in this case, in 22 weeks, it reduced them one entire clinical category. So again, it seems like it's safe and it's effective. And not only is it safe and effective in general, but it is also, reversing one of the things that people are worried about with older adults and resistance training, which is their high blood pressure. So what exactly do we need to know from this study? Well, in most cases, older adults are going to benefit from participating in resistance exercise. It's going to raise their cardiovascular conditioning. It's going to improve their skeletal muscle mass quantity, its function, so its quality, which should translate into improved balance confidence, easier activities of daily living, and possibly greater survivability, especially in terms of hospitalization. Programs should be designed with one thing in mind, which is consistent participation in this population. So the enjoyable and safe program that has your older adults showing up to train with you and not bailing on sessions or not stopping training is the optimal program. Also, power may be more beneficial in older adults than younger adults that are not athletic because it's linked or it's related to the balance confidence, the activities of daily life, ease, and other things. So that's another important consideration to make here. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next time.